get started, I'll introduce the Honorable Mayor of the City of Canton, Mayor Healy. He's going to give you a few opening remarks and welcome you to Canton, Ohio.
Well, welcome to Canton, Ohio. Thank you. They said keep it short, so I do want to say thank you all for being here. I know that you're touring around a number of different counties in Northeast Ohio, working on a regional format and collaboration and partnerships, and trying to figure out how to best create development, not just in your own communities, but in the region. And we are working very hard at the same, and I know that for Northeast Ohio, we have a lot in common with each other. But each region and each city has a little bit of differences, and we have different strengths and weaknesses. And what we found is that the inner city areas that have been the hub of the past have infrastructure that has been abandoned and left as the urban sprawl has happened throughout all the city areas. And as we look at trying to figure out how to maximize our current resources, those infrastructures are still in place, but incredibly underutilized. And those hubs where the cities are supply the jobs and the opportunity for the whole region. And as the cities are weakened, so are the regions. And I look at Stark County as a perfect example. Stark County is really only as strong as the city of Canton, although we only represent maybe 25% of the entire county. We are the county seat, and we have a big impact on how things operate. We are the largest city in Stark County, and we have the largest economic development team in-house compared to any other community, township, or local city or village in the area. And what that means is that when companies are looking for opportunities in Canton and Stark County, in most cases they end up contacting the city of Canton. Companies don't know where our borders are. They know Canton, and they could be 2 miles, 5 miles, 8 miles outside our city, but they think they're in the city of Canton. And so they call us. And what we found is, initially when I became mayor, we were always fighting to make sure, we got to take care of Canton and don't worry about the other guys. We want it in Canton. And I realized that there's so much opportunity out there and so many resources that the city of Canton has and doesn't have, but our neighbors do. And so when we have an opportunity to work on economic development, we will show them, companies or site selectors, whatever will come in, we'll show them sites in the city of Canton, but we also call the local communities. We'll call North Canton and Jackson Township, which is to the northwest of us. So we'll talk to Louisville and Canton South and Plain Township and Perry Township, all the surrounding areas. And we'll contact them and ask them, here's what we're looking for. We need so many acres, or this size building, or we need this type of rail connections, or whatever it is we're looking for to help us with a new business opportunity or a current business that wants to expand. And if we don't have it in the city of Canton, we will then show them the adjoining properties or the other properties in Stark County. A perfect example of this is Chesapeake Oil and Gas. We had been working with them for quite some time, and they needed a 200-acre plus size piece of property. We only had one site in the city of Canton that would even be large enough for them, and it wasn't really an ideal site. So our economic development team found and showed them sites in Louisville and Massillon, among others, and they chose the Louisville site, which is about a mile outside the city borders. I get criticized in the media because, hey, we didn't get Chesapeake here in Canton. Yet, we won. We brought a company in and helped bring a company into the community that's going to bring 600 to 700 plus jobs at that one facility. And I know, because of the population base that we have, that the city of Canton will probably receive at least 50% or more of those job opportunities. So even though they're not located within my borders, we absolutely helped out the city of Canton and Stark County, because we're working as a team format and we're not afraid to show properties outside our borders. We know firsthand when the Hoover Company went down in North Canton, it had a direct and immediate impact on the city of Canton. And these are the types of realities that you need to understand when you're talking about regionalism. And a great opportunity here in Canton, Ohio, and Stark County, and Northeast Ohio, I think if you look at the map of the counties that are represented by this group, we're on the southern end of that, and it's from here up to Cuyahoga and the Northeast. But if you look at what's going on right now in our community with the oil and gas exploration and what the opportunities are there, the city of Canton and Stark County is kind of right in the center of it. And it runs north of us and south of us, and it runs east and west of us. And what we're finding is that this industry is probably the largest, real, fastest growing opportunity that Canton, Stark County, and Northeast Ohio has seen since the steel industry came to our neck of the woods. And we are working incredibly hard to do our part in making sure that it's safe and clean, but at the same time that we want to make sure that we want to welcome the industry and let them know that we want them to come here, bring their companies here, bring those jobs here, and develop and grow our area. We are in a city, like many, that has had decades of decline. Population loss from urban sprawl and people moving down to Florida and other states. We've seen jobs and companies leave town literally since the 50s and 60s. Every decade you've seen that continuous trend. What I see right now is a defining moment in Canton's history, that the oil and gas industry, for the first time in over 50 years, the oil and gas industry is going to bring new industry, new jobs, new companies, and new opportunities. And over the next 10 years and beyond, you're going to see this area grow. More people moving into the area, more jobs and companies, and an expansion that completely goes against the last 50 to 60 year trend. We're very excited about it. Obviously, we want it to be safe, and we're concerned about the environmental concerns, but we are very, very excited about what that means. And we also understand that that is not a city of Canton opportunity. That's a Stark County, a Northeast Ohio, that's a regional opportunity for us. And we are already thinking and working in ways of partnerships and joint opportunities with our borders and our counterparts in other counties. So that's just an example of the things that have been discussed and talked about for years. I know that this program for regionalism has been on the table for many, many years, and it's very hard to get people to step up and say, I'm willing to sacrifice my own identity to be a part of the greater good. Incredibly hard. As the mayor of Canton, I was elected by the citizens of the city of Canton, not by Stark County, not by Northeast Ohio residents. And so when I have to make decisions on dealing with regional issues, I have to first ask myself what's best for my citizens in the short run and in the long run. Because in the short run, it may be being selfish and trying to protect Canton. But in the long run, to help our community, the regional approach is absolutely the best approach. And so it's a new way of thinking, or a different way of thinking than what we're typically used to. And so I applaud all of you for being a part of this and to work together and to try to help change the mindsets of politicians like myself, elected officials that represent individual communities. The hardest task you have is getting us to change our focus and how we approach development and opportunity, and saving resources by sharing and collaborating rather than trying to fight each other. So I know it's a monumental task, but we do have the message out there, and we are doing what we can to help partner and be a part of the regional approach. So thank you for what you do, thank you for what you're here for, and I hope you enjoyed your taste of Canton and Stark County while you're in town today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Healy, for your kind words and your warm welcome. And on behalf of the entire NEOSCC board, I'd like to thank all of the other officials that have made us all feel so welcome and that participated in the tour this morning. Before we get started with the business of the consortium this afternoon, I wanted to also extend an opportunity, if there are any other elected officials, either from Canton or Stark County, to introduce yourself and say a few words if you wish. Okay, seeing none. We'll go ahead and proceed with today's business. As is our practice, we'll go ahead and introduce all of ourselves around the table, board members, and I think there might be some board members behind me, so don't let me forget you as we go around the table. But my name's Jason Segedy. I'm the director of Greater Akron's Metropolitan Planning Organization, AMATS, and I'm also the chair of the consortium this year.
I'm Dan Manuel, a representative of Mahoney County and the Mahoney River Corridor Initiative, and the vice chair.
HunterMorrison, executive director of the consortium.
Bill Davian, I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Youngstown.
George Garchar, I represent Cafeterias Dyson of Youngstown on the communities and housing in Wood Street.
Janice Schweitzer, Ashtabula County, I'm on the housing Wood Street.
Stuart McDowell, Queen State University.
Great Advisor, President of the City of Acton, Communication Gates.
Greg Brown, Executive Director, Policy Bridge.
Pam Stockton, Deputy Director, Metropolitan Housing, and Nothing Housing.
Bob Now, Director of the Stark County Regional Planning.
Jeff Dutton with the Stark County Area Transportation Study.
John Gutchi, Director of State Regional Council.
Rachel Honey, Regional Council.
Brad Whitehead, Fund for our Economic Future.
I'm Donna Scoto with Summit County Public Health.
Emily Campbell, the Center for Community Solutions.
Bill Miller, Director of the Trumbull County Planning Commission.
Mike Challenger, Lorraine County Growth Partnership.
Steve Hambley, Medina County Commissioner and NOACA Representative.
GraceGallucci, NOACA, and Treasurer.
Mike Lyons, Regional Prosperity Initiative.
Joe Hadley, Director of Northeast Ohio, Fort County Regional Planning and Development Organization.
Angie Byington, Director of Community Development, City of Elyria.
Corey Minor-Smith, Stark Metropolitan Housing Authority, Director of Legal Services, and also on the Housing and Communities Work Stream.
Oh, Kelly Harris, Admin for NEOSCC.
Any board members I'm missing behind us?
Mark Moore, City Manager.
Okay, I think that's everybody. Thanks so much. First order of business is public comment. We do have a period set aside on the agenda for public comment, so if there is anyone from the audience that would like to address the consortium, you do have that opportunity right now. Okay, I don't think I was made aware of anyone, so don't see any hands. So we'll go ahead and go to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the July meeting. Those were distributed in your packets ahead of time, and we would be asking for motion at this time for approval of the minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is Emma Barcelona, and she'll be talking about the current financials and the budget.
So you have in your packets our through July 2012 expenditures report based on the current budget. At this point, we're about 50% funded via the HUD grant, and then the other 50% that we'll go into detail a little bit later is the match that you've all been contributing through your service towards this effort. But we're under budget in all the major categories and still performing to that. We also have our cash position, so you see how much we've receipted toward the organization and toward the activities. As noted, we've received more funds from HUD than we've expended at this time, because what we do is, based on the changes that we enacted this past spring, we draw down 100% of the funds relating to any contracts that we enter into at the front end of the contract and then pay out throughout the period there, as opposed to drawing it every time we receive an invoice. So you'll see our cash position there is at just under $1.5 million. And our expenditures to date are, at this time, just over $1 million. Any questions on expenditures or position there? Okay. So the next memo that you have is specifically speaking to contracts that we have taken on. So you see the performance there and the amount set aside in the POs to fund those contracts, any invoices pending, and then what we've expended to date, as well as a very brief status report regarding those contracts. You'll see that this month, as I did last month, I've broken it up between consultant contracts and then other contracts that relate just to the performance of the organization. One thing I did want to note at this time, at least with you heard from our auditors last month, the audit is complete. We still have not, they've not submitted our tax return yet. I'm hopeful that it's going to be within the next few weeks, but I think they were waiting for some additional clarification on a few items. And then you see here, we'll speak through, I noted And then one of the next agenda items will be the action requested regarding the resolution for the AI. But then you'll see under open and pending RFQs and RFPs, we still have our legal services and audit services open. We're still at one response for each. Although now in legal services, we do have a number of firms who have said they are going to be submitting. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have a handful for the committee to choose from for legal services. Audit services, I'll need to do some more outreach to find some firms to try for that work. The pending ones include scenario planning, which is a big one, as well as the lead program consultant that I know there'll be some discussion on later in the agenda. As well as program evaluation is still waiting in the wings. That's where we're waiting more information from HUD, and then some other ongoing consultants. Are there any questions on our current contracts or pending contracts? So then the next relates exact to the AI. It includes
I wasn't presenting it, but
Okay.
Hunter, were you going to present that?
do you want,
No, I think,
you want me to present the AI contract?
Go ahead,
Okay.
continue.
So what you have before you today is a resolution to approve a contract for the or an agreement, excuse me, for NEOSCC to enter into contract with a firm. Their name is Western Economic Services to conduct and carry out the research and all of the work that is with regard to NEOSCC's analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. The not to exceed amount at this time is $163,140, though likely it will be somewhat lower when you actually enter into contract. In the interview process last week, we wanted to get a revised price from them, and we still want to negotiate that a little bit down, but we wanted to make sure you knew that this would be the not to exceed as we enter into an agreement with them. This was procured via our standard services where there was a committee reviewing. We had 8 responses for the RFP, nationwide submissions. Those were narrowed down to 4 firms who ended up interviewing. One did drop out at the last minute, so they didn't end up wanting to be considered. And after the discussion, it led to Western Economic Services. Was there anybody from the committee who wanted to speak to this?
Fred.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to make one quick point. The decision to go with West Economics was really based on a couple of things. One, price, and the other factor was that they have some very interesting tools that I think will help build capacity within the region, because we talked intimately about the need to build capacity among organizations around this subject matter. There was a very close second organization in contention, which was J. Quad and Associates. And J. Quad had extensive experience from surrounding engagement around this, and they're very familiar with the scale in which this project deals with. The decision was a little bit tough, but when we decided on the organization WES, it was because of 2 factors that I just mentioned. But one recommendation came out of the committee, just for the board to take into consideration. And I know Patty Chobey from Hobart may be interested in hearing this. Since we talk about issues of equity as being an important factor in this whole process, this is going to be one of the few opportunities to lift those issues up. And taking that into account, we thought it would be very, very important when we're talking about community engagement to deal with those issues of equity and fairness. Many parts of this project do not necessarily highlight those types of factors. So the engagement part of this AI is extremely critical. So the suggestion that we had was this. One, we would go with West because of the difference in $100,000 of the price between J-Quad and West. And then the other reason was because of the tools that they provide. But if we could potentially reach out to J-Quad and Associates for assistance with the community engagement aspect of this process around AI, that could be something that we could potentially work out, because community engagement around this subject matter is going to be extremely critical. Again, if none other reason than the fact that equity and fairness is really the centerpiece of this type of study. And when you look at all the other work streams, that subject matter is not necessarily brought out and it's not necessarily evident. So community engagement in this realm is extremely important.
Fred. Among those who applied for this contract, were there any firms in Northeast Ohio, and then were there any firms of diverse nature? When you talk about equity and inclusion, I want to make sure that we're looking at.
Well, 2 points I want to bring up. One, J. Quad and Associates is a minority firm. And they have some extensive experience, again, around this as it relates to scale. And let me be more specific. J. Quad actually, in their contract, had laid out that they would have staff assigned by NPO, and that was a no crying of us. This was just written into their contract. So they have some familiarity with the nature and the makeup of how a regional program like this operates. So it was tough from that point. So J-Quad's vices was less virtues and vice versa. So that's why it's such a toss-up. But West far outweighs them from a fiscal standpoint. So the thinking was the money that we save by going with the West may open up some dialogue about potentially pulling in a minority firm such as J-Quad to assist with just the engagement aspect of AI working under Ms. Chauvin.
So to answer the question, in addition, we had one Northeast Ohio organization. They were a nonprofit. They were the ones that chose to remove themselves from consideration. Then there were, in addition to J-Quad, there was one other minority business enterprise who also happened to be a women-owned business as well. But based on the responses and how it moved, and that is always a consideration with NEOSCC and how we do it. But in this case, there was a couple other factors involved. And if I could just add one more or two more things before we move. The one other important thing, I think we brought this up last time, but I just wanted to emphasize again. We do have commitment from HUD that this analysis of impediments to fair housing, should any or all of the 22 entitlement communities contained within our region want to take this on, this can serve as their AI and it will be in force for the 5 years after we're complete in next year, at no cost to any of the entitlement communities, and they can be integrally involved in this process, and that is part of the outreach that needs to take place. So that's an important aspect of your work and this work on behalf of the region, that we can use this as a tool that can help those entitlement communities. An AI for any entitlement community can range in price, but typically for a medium to larger size community, we're talking 30,000 or above, and so this will be immediate impact for them should they choose to sign on and be part of this AI, and it will be again enforced for 5 years, up to 5 years after it's complete, so there's a timing there that would be helpful. The second thing I just wanted to note is I did want to thank our board member volunteers as well as our non-board member volunteers who supported Anthony on the committee, who reviewed all of the responses and took the time to meet and interact with all of the respondents. We really do appreciate your time on behalf of the organization. But it was great that we had a good representation of urban and rural as well as throughout our region to make sure those interests were spoken to and answered.
Thanks, Emma. We do have a resolution before us for the AI analysis as it was presented, and looking for a motion at this time.
I'll move.
A motion? Second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the resolution, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, I think the next item before us is Resolution 2012-15, which is procurement standards modifications. And part of this item is also to discuss the appointment of a finance committee. So at this time, I believe that I have Dan Manuel, who's volunteered to present this and talk a little bit about the group that got together to discuss the procurement standards and the concept of creating a finance committee. Take it away, Dan.
In July, the executive committee and the chair appointed a committee to review our procurement policies and to examine them to to look at ways that we might be able to make them more efficient, as well as keeping them accountable, transparent, and in accordance with high policy rules and all auditing and accounting procedures. With that in mind, we revisited the then current standards, and they're part of this document. You can see those for comparison purposes. And it was my consideration and other committee members' considerations were identified in the memo that they were too time-consuming and they were too restrictive, and they didn't need to be that way to be in conformity to transparency, openness, accountability, but they were slowing down process, especially in that range of contracts between $25,000 and $100,000. It took full board. It just took too long. So what we did was we put out, with the help of Emma and a number of the committee members, we put out a proposed standard revision on glass cubes, and I think it was announced at last meeting. Anybody who wanted to comment, make suggestions, and so forth, we opened it up to all of the organization as well as the committee. And as a result of those comments and feedback and interaction we had amongst ourselves and with others, we came up with a proposed standard you see in the document, the memo. And I believe there's a resolution subsequent to that. This was also vetted through legal to get any legal ramifications as far as it was consistent with our code of regulations. What we initially thought to do was simply to adopt a new procurement procedure and establish a finance committee, but as you see, it really ends up creating a finance and audit committee to be consistent with the bylaws of the organization. So what we have is what you see. I mean, it's pretty much self-explanatory, and where the biggest changes are is on the $25,000 to $100,000 range of contracted service or vendor services. We inserted the finance committee as the authorizing body, and with notification to the executive committee. And the proposal is to create a finance committee consisting of 5 members: the vice chair, a vice chair, treasurer, and 3 additional board representatives, all appointed by the board president. They could handle those matters falling within that range. Then when you move up to $100,000 to $200,000, consistent with HUD requirements, we keep the MPO with review committee, but we allow the executive committee to be the authorizing body. And they will also review proposals over $200,000, but they would be the authorizing body up to that amount. Over 200 would require the full board. So what we've done is we tiered this thing in order to expedite. You'll also notice that the finance committee could meet as needed, and that primarily would probably happen before an executive committee meeting or at that time. So we're trying to cut down on the amount of meeting time it takes to do business, and also open the door to possibly moving board meeting to less frequently than once a month. Right now, you almost have to meet once a month. As we move forward, we're hoping we can make the full board meetings every 2 months or possibly every 3 months with this when it comes to procuring services. That we won't have that immediate need to do that. In a nutshell, that's what we try to do. And I thank everyone that's listed on the memo. That would be Grace, Sarah Meyer, Tom Terrell, Rachel, and Emma for their input, and others who joined in. Any questions of what we're trying to do here? Any concerns? I think we addressed all the amendable issues. Yes, sir.
So I'm familiar with the HUD rules for the big ones. I'm not familiar with the HUD rules for the little ones. So the up to 3,000, 2025, the 25 to 100. Are those some standards that are established, or do we make those amendments?
I'm sorry, I can go.
He's not familiar. He wants to address the HUD rules with regard to the 3,000 to the 25,000 range.
Well, I guess as far as the process, it's consistent. The only exception is that since it's federal funds, everything above 3,000 has to have sort of 3 estimates or quotes. So that's the only variation. Up to 3,000 quotes aren't necessary. But anything between 3,000 and 100,000 require at least 3 quotes and three estimates. And then an RFP or other open procedure for above $100,000.
So this is what we're recommending to simplify. Is consistent with HUD rules. What we have is more restrictive than what HUD requires. As Dan pointed out, that adds layers of meetings to make this relatively straightforward decisions.
And the other aspect is right now we RFP anything above 25,000, where the federal regs actually say above 100,000. So we're moving up to 100,000. We'll do bids or quotes instead of an RFP, or perhaps we'll do an RFP if we would like to do it a little different, but we're not beholden to that.
All right. So for our funding source, for our current funding source, this makes perfect sense. But should we be fortunate enough to get a private grant or some alternative funding or earn our own money in some fashion, I think what we're doing is locking ourselves into completely this strategy for all kinds of money that we might get. So is this just for the HUD grant, just for public dollars, or this is the policy of the organization for all?
Well, as I understand it, it's the procurement policy. That one procurement policy for all monies that would become part of the consortium.
Right.
Now, if it has to be addressed for whatever reason, Stuart, it'll always be amended.
I understand. And I understand what you're getting at. That just, if we're going to have a nonprofit, one of the advantages to have a nonprofit is that it's not government.
Right.
And so all of our, I mean, it looks like government, it acts like government, it's government, but it's not. So I suppose we could amend it at some future point when we got a different funding source. Okay.
That's all.
Any further questions or discussion before we have a motion?
Sorry, just for a point of clarification, so the resolution for the record. I noted you said board president and that it says president in the resolution, but we don't actually have a president, so I assume you need to share.
Yeah, that's correct.
Chair, yeah. I mean, the one I have, the instant president, the one I have.
I didn't hear the question.
For your record, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I think the memo it said president, but the resolution, where at least where I see, does say board chair.
Oh, you're talking about appointing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the board chair.
And I think just a point of clarification procedurally, it's probably best if we vote on the resolution and then move, once the resolution's approved, move into the discussion of the appointment of the actual finance committee, because the resolution does authorize us to create a finance committee. So if there is a motion, we can proceed forward.
Move to approve the resolution.
Motion from Mr. Hambley.
Second.
Photo finish between Mr. Lyons and Mr. Brown. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion. Oh, one opposed. Okay, motion carries. And yes, very closely related to this, if you see the resolution does authorize the creation of a finance committee, and Dan talked a little bit about this, that it would be a vice chair, the treasurer, which is GraceGallucci from NOACA, and then 3 additional board representatives appointed by the chair. And we discussed this at the executive committee a little bit and felt it would be best for me to reach out to a couple people as prospective nominees that would be willing to serve, but then take the slate of nominees back to all of you to ratify, to make sure everyone was comfortable with the finance committee membership. So I did reach out to Mike Lyons from RPI, also to Holly Brinda, Mayor of Elyria, and to Bob Now from Stark County Regional Planning Commission, and they did all express willingness to serve as our 3 board members for this year on the finance committee. So I submit those names to you for your discussion and approval.
Move to approve.
Any further discussion? All in favor of those three nominees, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Thank you. All right, next order of business, I will turn things over to Hunter, and he's going to discuss some of the organizational work that's been going on and also resolution for approving the work plan. And I will say this is an item that the staff and board members have done a lot of work on. Probably is the cornerstone of today's agenda as far as getting everyone comfortable with what's proposed for the work plan. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Hunter.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the third resolution we're going to be asking you to pass on is an adoption of a resolution amending the existing work plan. Now, many of you were not at the part of the board, many were, but a significant number, I believe, of the current members are not part of the board in April of last year when the existing work plan was adopted. It was prepared by a small group of original stakeholders in this organization, really led by Bill Miller and Kirby Date and Sarah Meyer, to produce a work plan for the project that would meet the HUD requirements, both in terms of content and in terms of timeliness. As you may know, we received a grant notification in February of last year, and by April needed to have both the budget and a work plan put together. And with the help of particularly Bill Miller, using a template that was developed, I think, based on what OKI, a comparable MPO in Cincinnati, had prepared. We developed a work plan which has been guiding our work to date. Embedded within that were the work streams that were part of our original proposal and many of the outcomes. But for those of you who remember it or have read it, it's a pretty technical document that looks very much like an MPO, long-range transportation plan, work plan, with all sorts of sections and subsections and sub-subsections. Not very legible. But also it embeds within it a fundamental concept that this was a single terminal grant, and that once the work was over of doing the HUD Sustainable Communities plan, in a sense the organization would disappear like Cinderella's couch midnight. And in fact, the original flowchart suggested a period of demobilization following that. We several months ago brought in Career, Sally Parker and her team to do the sort of board development that boards of this nature need, and frankly we probably should have done a little earlier in the cycle, but we were busy with many of the fundamental logistics. And the work that she did, I think, revealed a couple of things. First of all, we're a very large organization, and we expanded from the original core group to a board, to an expanded board very quickly, and not everybody was on the same page. But also there were a set of expectations that were also embedded within the grant application that didn't quite make it into the original work plan, about the long-range future of the organization. Its mission and its vision and its purpose, and its sustainability beyond the HUD money. That, to be perfectly frank, is not clearly articulated within the existing work plan, because again, the existing work plan was really framed around a project funded by a single funding entity with support also from the Fund for Economic Future. So, to boil down, and Sally's here, if I get it wrong, you can certainly correct me. The work of her firm and a core group that voluntarily came together for many hours of work to essentially bring us back to the intentionality of the organization before it existed as an organization. When it existed as a consortium or a collection of organizations and entities from throughout Northeast Ohio, that frankly the MPOs and the fund with its largesse was able to cobble together to get this successful grant. What I want to do is go through very briefly sort of what we've accomplished both as the organization and as an organization seeking to clarify and refine its mission both to itself and to the world, and the implications for the work plan which we have before you. What you have before you in the document is a revised work plan which has actually been written to be read by normal people. It's written in English. It embeds a certain amount of poetry and aspiration that the original document did not, and hopefully it reflects the intentionality of those who came together 2.5 years ago to say we can do better in Northeast Ohio. It also it is very clear about things we do now that will carry on beyond the original HUD work, and weaves those carefully into the document. So let me go briefly through again what we are and who we are and where we're going. This is part of this is a presentation that I was fortunate to make to Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur about 2 weeks ago, which I think is sort of the first rollout of some of our bigger ideas, and I think that's a pretty tough audience given that she's not only a congresswoman but a city planner, and I think we passed muster. But one of the first things we remind people of is the funding from HUD and from the fund, the planning process for 12 counties, now a 32-member consortium that has come together. This next document, which is really one of the fundamental pieces of the core of the work that has taken place with the careers assistance, is to define who we are as a nonprofit organization, as a member-led regional consortium of public agencies, elected officials, philanthropic and nonprofit organizations that exist to create conditions for a more vibrant, resilient, and sustainable Northeast Ohio, with a clear vision that this organization is a transformational regional collaboration, not just any regional collaboration, a transformational regional collaboration whose members practice sustainability principles and advocate for policies and programs to create an enhanced and enduring quality of life in Northeast Ohio. Simple words, but aspirational words, and hopefully words that we can all use as we explain who we are to the groups that we're all involved with. Out of this discussion also emerged a clear core strategy to encourage, equip, and support Northeast Ohioans, both consortium members and citizens, to learn, share, create, and act together. Now, for those of you who remember the presentations we have had on our communications and engagement plan, which was put together painstakingly by a committee which is led by Fred Wright and Mike Lyons, who have participated very carefully in all this, learn, share, create, and act. An idea that Jeff Anderley brought to us and has been embedded within our engagement process is really part of who we are, with an intention of relentlessly driving for improvements in the formal and informal systems, eliminating waste of resources, engaging communities to co-create a viable future. We heard a little bit from the Mayor of Canton this afternoon about the challenge of co-creation and collaboration, demonstrating the case for change with reliable data, developing planning and collaboration tools, leveraging our assets, catalyzing, supporting, and coordinating local action, establishing metrics, and promoting interconnectivity. Clearly, this is a strategy that's not going to be executed within the time and money terms of the federal grant. This is a long-term and aspirational goal, but there were 6 areas of concentration. Completing the VibrantNEO 2040 vision and framework. And again, that's the document you have before you. It's not just a plan submitted to HUD, the language of a vision and a framework with a goal of laying out where we are going to be in 2040. Creating a dashboard which outlines goals and includes metrics, current data, bright spots, and makes the case for change. Building a capacity to co-create regional vitality. Developing and promoting an action toolkit, which includes best practices, replicable templates, shared data, informing policy and funding priorities, and engaging to enable and connect the will and skill for regional vitality. Again,
aspirational, but it speaks to not just a plan, but the tools and methods and policies to carry it out over the long term. There's a great deal of concern, I think, with all of us, and clearly came out of the core group, that we shouldn't just do a plan. And we all agree that you can't just do a plan and expect it to implement itself, that this organization, if it has a continued future, which we all believe, is an organization that will promote that. Again, our list of members, which is unique and broad, we've done our conditions assessment, and one of the key things we keep reinforcing, and it's clearly articulated within the document before you, is we're not like a lot of other places. We're not a place where sustainability means controlling growth. In our part of the world, we've experienced region-wide population loss, not just in our core cities, but across the 12 counties since 1970. We continue to see the 60-year shift from labor-intensive production and working-class communities in our legacy cities to a more contemporary form both of economic activity and of residential and community life. We have the low-density suburbs, but they combine with the population loss that our core cities have experienced. And one of the things I know many of us have been concerned with, and the fund has brought to our attention on many occasions, is the chronic structural fiscal challenge that this places on local governments, which has only gotten worse in recent years. That our resources, both cultural and natural, are under stress. The cost of infrastructure being spread over a relatively stable population creates fiscal impacts, and we also have a land use impact for our area of 12 counties. Now, it's helpful to remind us sort of where we are in this process. The process of doing a plan is a fairly straightforward effort that starts with what do we have, then asks what do we want, and third is how do we get there. That's a regional sustainability plan and a toolkit. That's the core of what the federal funds are doing here and the other grant recipients. We have been focused on that first block to the left, the what do we have. We are moving into the framing of the vision and the framing of the plan. In order to do that, we have explored and are advocating and will be putting out an RFP to do scenario planning. This is one of also the big shifts in the mindset that's embedded within this new work plan. The existing work plan contemplated a much more conventional process of going out several times to the communities without the benefit of some of the technologies that other communities, such as Salt Lake City and San Diego and places like that, have been using to manage growth. So what we are recommending is a scenario planning process that will look at both project existing conditions forward and ask what happens if nothing changes, and looks at working with the communities across Northeast Ohio and what are the other options. We said early on that the way to do this in a polycentric region like our own, which does not have structures that are regional in nature, is to operate using our networks, our network of networks, and that again is also embedded within the communications and engagement strategy. And as time goes forward, you'll hear both Jeff and Patty talk about network of networks until you're tired of hearing about it. But that is really the way in which we are going to be able to manage, not only today, but in the future, this very complex region the size of the state of Connecticut. This is an important map to put on. The top four boxes are the same. It's the plan. What do we have? What do we want? How do we get there? That's your plan. The arrows suggest two other outcomes which go, frankly, beyond the plan. And if anything, that's really what emerged in the discussions with the core group and with the staff, that we want a sustainable common ground for collaboration. We've done plans before. We've done a lot of different things before in this region, but we have not yet developed a common ground for collaboration. That means we come back and revisit our work on a regular basis to see how we're progressing, and we grow together the capacities both as a region and within our individual communities to operate more effectively, to do more with less, as George Vornovich is wont to say. The second piece is developing the intellectual, institutional, and community capacity to leverage our universities, to not do what happened with the Doxiadis study 40 years ago, which was spend a lot of money, do some great work, and wind up forgetting all about it and putting it in. Actually, the documentation from that entire effort is in rolls of paper and files in Tom Byer's office in the basement of CSU. Not very useful repository for a great civic endeavor in the mid-1970s. So how are we going to create that framework intellectually? How are we going to train the next generation of folks coming out of our universities? How are we going to leverage the strengths of our metropolitan planning organizations and our COGs and our cities and our think tanks and our foundations to create a common ground and a capacity for action? That really came forward in the outcome products that we talk about: the dashboard, the toolkit, the policies, and the pilots. Those are the beginning process of moving forward, but also everything we're trying to do in terms of engagement is designed to further the co-creation of that common ground for capacity. We've done a lot over the last year, and I'm afraid we haven't really tooted our horn enough, because this is really a significant effort on the part of all of us to create the project management office, to create this organization, to get the 501c3 to be actually an operating organization. We've worked with over 200 subject matter experts throughout Northeast Ohio, organized around our 5 work streams. We've analyzed, as we said we would, over 200 initiatives and planning documents to go back, and in addition, there's more that we could put on this slide about the young professionals meetings that we've had, about the outreach meetings that we've had, about the engagement with other organizations doing similar work in Northeast Ohio and in the Great Lakes region and nationally. Now, I'm put my planner's hat on, and one of the most important, significant, and mind-boggling pieces of work we've done is a 12-county land use map. Again, for those who are not planners, this is just a map. For those who deal with the realities of land use, this is significant because it's parcel-based. It's grounded in auditors' files. We've leveraged the capacity in the 12 county auditors' offices of Northeast Ohio through the 4 MPOs in Cuyahoga County to access the information that they collect to tax us all, anybody who owns property. We have every reason to believe it's reasonably accurate, because property owners and their lawyers make sure that those classifications are reasonably accurate. They will be updated on a regular basis. What we did through Bob Now's leadership, and frankly, this idea came, I think, Bob, if I'm not correct, out of your office, and your staff took the lead here, is to figure out how to take 120 classifications and ramp them up to general land use classifications. This is a map that, in addition to that, is scalable, so Angie Byington can take this back to Mayor Brenda and say, okay, what's it look like in Elyria? We can also break this apart, and we've just started to do that, to look at what percentage of the land area, for instance, in Northeast Ohio is industrial or is classified as agricultural. Now, the second product, which was done in about 6 months, and understand that it took, I think, NOACA about 2 years to do this by hand 15 years ago, for 5 counties. This is a generalized zoning map. Now, this is based on technology and a protocol that Jason Segedy's office developed. If you go and look at his document, Connecting Communities, and his staff developed the process by which we can take the zoning regular codes of about almost 400 jurisdictions in 12 counties in 4 MPOs and generalize them, and be able then through the database to go back to each and every one of those communities and say, well, what is an R2 in Wadsworth? Or what we were talking about yesterday, the C4s. What's a C4 in Wadsworth, and how does that aggregate up to the zoning in Medina County and the zoning in Northeast Ohio. This again is disaggregatable, which means we can look at how we're zoned versus how we're using our land. It's also updatable because again it works back to the codes, and it's parcel based, so you can do very close comparisons. These are tools that have been developed by our MPOs and Cuyahoga County's GIS, leveraging those resources. So we've leveraged county auditors, we've leveraged our MPO GIS systems. We need to develop the protocols for maintaining that and for going forward. And we've also delivered value for at least one county in Northeast Ohio. That's Ashtabula County. That's part of the Eastgate COG. Eastgate COG includes the 3 counties of the Mahoning Valley, and Ashtabula, as you know, is one of the if not the largest county in the state of Ohio. It also has a low population and is struggling to make ends meet in their planning area. All but one of the communities in Ashtabula County had paper-based maps. None of that was on computer. So Eastgate staff worked with the county of Ashtabula and all of the communities up there to give value there by digitizing all of their land use, all of their zoning maps. Now that's value immediately from this project to one of our member counties, which is frankly the least well-resourced in terms of planning of any that we have. And we developed the Condition and Trends platform with a lot of work, again, with the thought leadership from members of this board and a lot of extremely careful, close editing with Joe Hadley and Mike Lyons, working with the R Strategies team and with Jeff to go through each and every one of the conditions to make sure that it passed the Steve Hambley test. The Steve Hambley test is Dr. Steve looks at the conditions, he puts his PhD dissertation hat on and says, excuse me, where is the citation? And in fact, our other guru, Stuart Mandel, did point out, and we've gone back, Stuart, to correct this, we need to make sure that every graphic has its citation. So we're working diligently to make sure that the information you have out there, in fact, works and passes the smell test. And Steve, when you're out in the community, you can say, yeah, the reason we're saying this is, in fact, it's true. It's been said this is a relatively somber set of findings. That's not accurate. It's an accurate set of findings. This reflects the conditions that we have found in Northeast Ohio, broken down by theme and work stream and atlas, and it's searchable, and like the maps, it's updatable. So over the past 6 months, this is what I just went through is what we've essentially accomplished over the last year. Our staff came on board in August of last year. It's not bad for a year's worth of work for an organization that is still being born. But one of the key issues that we needed to address is the organizational development work. And to this point, over the last 6 months, the core group working with Career has really focused on organizational structure, determining the strategic intent, purpose, vision, core strategy, and areas of concentration, the organizational design principles of establishing trust, inspiring leadership, enabling change, and leveraging collective resources, defining clearly the work products, the enabling process, and the value stream, and co-creating this revised NEO, Vibrant Northeast Ohio 2040 vision and framework for our future, which we're asking you to adopt today so that we can submit it to HUD for its approval. That process aligned our vision and our organizational strategy. This is, again, the strategic intent, and I went through that earlier about the purpose, the vision, the core strategy, and the areas of concentration. The organizational principles of how to move forward by establishing trust across this organization, inspiring ownership at the board level and the staff level and through the region, enabling change by enabling a change in mindset and actions and outcomes, and leveraging collective resources, which I think, as I said, as I tried to demonstrate, we've already been doing in large areas and in small. Now, the reason I want to show you this graphic, it's embedded also within the document. This is the products and processes matrix that came out of many hours of discussion. What are the work products? The work products are the VibrantNEO 2040 vision and framework. That's the plan. But the work products also are a dashboard, toolkit, policy recommendations, and pilots. Those, in essence, are the products that will be there be developed starting now and moving forward to carry out the plan. Now, typically, for those of us who are professional planners, you first do your plan and then you do your implementation. There's a very strong sense in all of this work that we need to start on the implementation elements now as we do the plan. It's an ambitious effort, but we believe that it's possible to get well along in creating those. Those are the things, in addition to the plan, that not only carry it out, but outlast the planning process and differentiate this from the efforts that have preceded it, like the Doxiata study. But equal attention was paid to, okay, this is the what, let's focus on the how. Those are the enabling process, the development of the consortium and regional networks, the paying attention to content and information management, paying attention to policy and systems analysis and administration. So you'll see also within your document the chart that focuses on what does it take for an organization to do more than a plan. Because if you simply wanted to do a plan, you would have consulted the whole thing out 2 years ago and gone home. You don't need the staff, you don't need to spend a lot of time in organization, you just contract for it and go home. But again, the intent is to be an organization that outlives the planning process itself. And to do that, there needs to be intentional focus on consortium and network development, on enabling processes to engage through outreach and engagement, communications, to have a high-performing board, to have usable products for target audiences, and to have a clear message that's developed and articulated that builds consensus. To focus on content management, to enable information processes that support the development of integrated subject matter expertise, to get people to talk across the boundaries, to manage our information in an organized way, and to develop that platform moving forward. And again, even starting with our land use maps. We've done them, how do we maintain them? What's the role of our MPOs in Cuyahoga County in keeping them up to date? And who's going to use those? Policy and systems analysis needs to focus on the process of critical path thinking and enabling best practices and highlighting priority common ground issues and identifying those strong policies and practices. And finally, focusing on in administration, both of the HUD grant and the consortium long term. You'll also see in the document an end-to-end process map. A great deal of attention was spent on saying, okay, how do we do this? It's one thing to talk about doing a dashboard. How are you going to do that? It's one thing to talk about making policies. How do you do that? Well, borrowing actually, I think, from the private sector, this is pretty much an industrial or an IT type of product development process, which starts by defining your needs, what's your market want, developing the products and services, testing those, launching them, and then maintaining and sustaining them. And in our conversations, I think, Jeff, it was you that came up and said, you know, it's one thing to do it. We need to have that feedback loop. But everybody contributed to this process of saying, okay, it's not just enough to say we need a dashboard or to put one out there. How are we going to test it, launch it, and learn it? And this idea has been embedded in the flow chart that I circulated to you, the basic Gantt chart for the next 18 months. Let me focus on give you some heads up on the next 2 months and the next 4 months. In September and in October, we're going to be asking for board review and approval of consultant contracts for a regional planning consultant and a scenario planning consultant. We have been developing and are sending out by the end of this week an RFP that incorporates both. Our initial thought was, let's do a scenario planning consultancy, but as further discussion obtained, it made sense, given the timing of this project and the demands on everybody's effort, to wrap that in a broader regional planning consultancy that would bring additional management support to the PMO and the board. and potential additional board and staff facilitation. We're also on the VibrantNEO 2040 effort going to be moving forward with metro area planning workshops, and at the end of my presentation I'd like Jeff to talk a little bit about how that's going to deploy with Patty Chobe and the group. We're going to need to develop a much more refined board and staff in service matrix for scenario planning in particular, but also for the work on the products. You've all been very generous in your forthcoming in your consortium agreements about staff, but it's our obligation to come back to you and say, here's who we need, here's the skills we need to do the job, and come back to you with specific assignments for your folks. Engaging people across Northeast Ohio is going to take a lot of labor. We're going to need help doing that. But as we've defined our needs, I will say, whether it was Connie Krause coming to our rescue when we were confronted with the arcane world of HUD logic models, and frankly couldn't figure it out. And your folks came in and said, "Oh, here's how you do it." And within 2 days, we were safe sailing. As we come to you individually and as organizations and said, "Here's what we need," you have been extremely generous and forthcoming in that. I think we owe it to you to say, over the next 18 months, here are the skill sets we need, and we're going to be developing that. We're going to be completing the work on the Quality Connected Places work stream, which is really focused on templates. As you recall from those of you who participated in the scenario planning workshops, one of the key tools is essentially the visual preference. What do you see? What do you value? What's important in Northeast Ohio in terms of place, in terms of building types? And we have a team this summer that's been going out and documenting uniquely Northeast Ohio assets. And finally, we expect in September and October to get a report from our economic development work stream on competitive job centers and corridors, which is an innovative construct that's come out of this consortium, which deals with ways in which we bring the aspatial economic development focus to ground, around where are the jobs, where's the transit, and the like. And we're going to be moving through the needs assessment phase on the dashboard toolkit policies and practices, and we're going to be needing to work with you and the work streams to define what those needs are in those areas through our staff. We expect over the next 4 months in November and December to ask you to review and approve the fiscal impact analysis consultant, if that is in fact separate from the regional planning consultancy. Part of scenario planning is fiscal impact. There's been a good deal of discussion about that. That needs to be refined as to how that would work, but it's clearly a tool that communities can use. Review and approval of final workstream reports from our 2 outliers, and board participation in scenario planning. With the plan itself, we expect, having engaged a consultant, to be focused on baseline scenario work, identifying regional values and goals. We expect to be well along in the assessment of impediments to fair housing choice and have an interim report to you. We expect also to be finished with the typologies and to answer some concerns that have been expressed by our partners at the fund to really drill down on the relationship between NEOSCC and REX. REX is the Regional Economic Competitiveness Strategy. And I will say, as an interesting and important footnote to the meeting we had with Shelley Petitia 2 weeks ago, she mentioned that the Economic Development Administration is actively considering joining the federal consortium and considering being able to designate the plans that come out of the Sustainable Communities Grant as region-wide SEDS, and we need to define what that means. That's community economic development strategies, which could make life easier for many of our communities. We need to make sure that that does not come at the expense of to organizations that are already doing closer drill downs. But the idea of collaborating across these platforms is continuing to grow and moving into the development phase of our processes. And Sally, this is for you. Over the next 18 months, if anybody remembers the story of the blind man and the elephant, and the story of the blind man and the elephant is an ancient one in China and in India and in Persia, but it's basically the reality that when you have when you are trying to figure something very complicated out, everybody's got their own take on it. And I think as we've gone around the region as individuals and collectively to figure out what is Northeast Ohio, what do we need and where are we going, in part it is dealing with everybody's individual perceptions and community perceptions about the nature of the whole. And depending again on which mythology you go back to. I take the more optimistic ones that says the king, the emperor or the king, when he queried the blind men about the nature of the elephant, told them that they were all right because they all had a piece of the puzzle. But that's the challenge before us today, is to define that elephant, which is Northeast Ohio. So with that, I'd like to ask for any questions, but also to suggest that we move on the approval of the work plan.
Questions for Hunter? Discussion? Steve?
Yeah, I do. Particularly, and as you know, we've had some conversations about the members of the work stream. And I know we have some that are here who are involved in some of the others that connections and so forth. How do you see those work stream members working into this new work plan?
Well, I think, and I must apologize to the work stream members that have perhaps been confused. As we've been sorting this out, we haven't communicated as clearly as we need to, and I'll admit to that, stipulate to that fact. The work streams are region-wide subject matter experts. They're a very important core group to our effort. They have been very important in creating the condition and trends assessment within their groups. There's a very clear awareness that they were set up as silos, and what we need to do is cut across. What we're going to be doing, first of all, we want them to be actively engaged in the development of the 2040 plan. They represent and come from communities throughout Northeast Ohio. They've devoted time and effort to our work. They are part of our team. We need to engage them as we go out into the geographies of Northeast Ohio and keep them involved. But the challenge will also be to ask folks to participate in the creation of the dashboard. What are the factors and concerns that are of importance to you? The creation of the tools. Again, what are those tools? Particularly, I think vital will be the creation of policies that cross over the line. What are the policies, not just within your area, but across? For instance, we're getting a little at that in the economic development area. How do you look at competitive job centers through the transportation lens, or the connection lens, and the economic development lens, and the community lens? I think we're going to be posing through our PMOs and consultants those questions to the individuals. One of the things I would like to do is figure out a way, Steve, to bring them together and thank them for their efforts, for the countless hours of time that they put in to drilling down, and we need to keep them involved. What we found is some want to stay involved just they have the time, others want to be of service when needed, on call, and so we need to respect that. But no, we need to make sure that they still feel and are deeply embedded in this process.
So if I understand that right, then the work streams will still exist, but then rather than advancing individual agendas, they'll be reacting to things coming forth from the work plan?
Yeah, well, then I would hope they're not just reacting, they're engaging perhaps right. in those discussions. In other words, the way to perhaps to drill down on where should intra-regional bus service go relative to employment centers, you ought to have people from both of those work streams working on that around some maps. So to your point, no, we are not disbanding the work streams, but we're not going to meet for the sake of meeting either. We need to task them to work with us, and I've asked our work stream our PMOs to go and work with our work streams. Several have gone and done individual interviews to get to take the temperature of individual members, but we're going to need to get them to give us guidance specifically, Brad, on the products. What's important in the dashboard from the environmental side? What's important in the dashboard or in the toolkits from the community side? What are the things that you think ought to be put on the plate? And then how do we sort those out? Yes, Jason.
Hunter, I think the work plan does do a very good job of capturing what the core team worked on, and as somebody who participated in that process, I really appreciate that, and really wanted to thank you and all the other members of both the staff and the board that sat through a lot of long meetings kind of fleshing out the original draft of the work plan. I did have one specific question about schedule and more pertaining to we'll take the pilots and the dashboard as an example. Those other products that were listed a couple of slides ago, the pilots, the dashboard and so forth, you had mentioned as being in the development phase over the next 4 months. And I was just wondering if you had some thoughts or if the work plan maybe addresses this on, so then what happens on those products after the 4 months as far as deliverables or milestones. I just wanted to see if you had thoughts or maybe something to take us through a discussion of what we can anticipate early next year.
Well, what we've attempted to do in the master calendar is basically take those processes and segment them by the different phases, and basically on a quarterly level to present. I think there is some real concern both on the part of the staff and on the part of others that this is extremely ambitious to get everything done. So we're going to, part of this is sort of learning by doing in terms of what can we accomplish. But what we've laid out there in the green bars, and I apologize that we had more people come to the meeting than we anticipated. So not everybody's got a copy of it, but the green bars suggest quarterly reports and keeping to a discipline that's based on that product flow, with reports at the end of every quarter about where we've come on this. That's and we're going to be laying that out into what does that mean in terms of weekly and monthly.
So it looks like for on pilots, for example, maybe going through, say, Christmas, we're having discussions like you and Brad were talking about a couple minutes ago. Work streams might be weighing in on those pilots, or we're framing the issue here at the board or the executive committee, and then it looks like on this schedule, come January, February, we might be entering into a process where it's listed under recommendations here. We might identify some pilots and start to move forward on working on those. And I guess at that point, it would make sense to me, it probably is anybody's guess how long those might take, until we have them identified. But it looks like you've got that addressed here.
Yeah, I mean, again, these generalized work plan like this is going to be subject to review as you get on the path. But what we felt was that we ought to try to follow that disciplined process of designing, testing, launching, and do this using essentially a framework of quarterly meetings. As you mentioned, we may go to quarterly meetings for this board to try to set those as goals, because frankly, if we don't set goals, we'll never get there. If we don't set interim goals. I think this is one of the values, frankly, of the work that you do in the core group. Say, yeah, we want a dashboard, but we don't want to wait till the end to define what a dashboard is. I'm not sure in all of these things that we're going to be exhaustive, and I don't frankly think that for an organization like this that has an intent of going on beyond this, that we ought to be, much as we're not exhaustive on the conditions. That's why it's a platform, because we're going to continue to add to it. But we also do know at this point there are best practices out there that we ought to be able to document. There are tools that we're all frustrated that aren't there that we ought to put on the list. There are policies that we can collectively agree on that we ought to be advancing. And there are prototypes, if not that we can do, that we can point to. For instance, in Oberlin, many of the things that they're doing are essentially prototypical in the sense that they're disciplined efforts to try something and report back on it. So we may, as an organization, say we can't really get too deeply into doing prototypes. We certainly can identify prototypical activities. It causes, it hopefully will create the sort of animated discussions that we all want. It's about where we're going forward. Yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you, Hunter, or Jason, or maybe Sally, but in 17 months, how do we want to think about success? is success going to be the fulfillment of the work plan, of the items on the work plan? Is success progress against metrics on the dashboard? Or is success something else? Community awareness and commitment, or how should we think about this?
Well, I think first of all, one success factor needs to be that we've completed a sustainable regional plan and a map that we can submit to HUD and successfully close out the federal grant. That's sort of the baseline of success in my view. But I think you raised a very important question about what is success going forward. And we do, and that I think can instruct also our polling that our strategies has been doing in terms of trying to understand, you know, where the community is now and where it might be at the end of this. But I'd like to hear from people, other people's answers to what is success, because that's a very important question for this organization to grapple with.
Brad, I think that's a great question and probably something that would behoove all of us to think about between now and the next executive committee or next board meeting. I think from my standpoint, like Hunter said, delivering a plan to HUD that is reflecting the aspirations that we've discussed, that it be more than just a document, that, you know, the old cliche of it sitting on a shelf, but having things in it that people can, within their own organizations, start to implement and making it something that can live in the region beyond. But I think, to me, success is moving beyond just that traditional planning process and using things like the dashboard and pilots to at least get going on some, you know, on the ground action on sustainability. And I think, to me, success could be not necessarily having a completed pilot by December of 2013, but having a couple underway that we could collaborate on, our organizations and NEOSCC. The same thing with the dashboard. You know, I, just personally speaking, I don't know how much progress we'll make on fixing things that the dashboard shows could be improved in the next 12 months, but I think based on the work on the existing conditions and trends, that kind of evolving into a dashboard, I think we could have a great dashboard by the time the project ends to collectively work from. And I was just talking to Dan here a second ago, probably the biggest single measure of success to me is when we get toward the end of this project, that people feel that what we're doing here is worthwhile enough to continue on in some way. Because I think if we get to where everyone feels good about this and wants to continue, that shows that there really is some meat here that people are interested in pursuing. And I think if we decide that we're not ready to do that, then maybe we haven't succeeded as much as a lot of us hoped. Grace?
Yeah, I think another element of success that we probably need to think about is ensuring that the plan, and I'll use that very broad term, the regional plan, which includes dashboard and metrics and so forth, pilots and policies, is a output that can be accepted beyond the people in this room. And so we need to make sure that the folks in the 12-county region that will be implementing the policies, pilots, the strategies, are entirely on board, starting with an adoption of those plans by the appropriate governmental bodies and non-governmental bodies. But we need to make sure that that goes beyond this group and that it is accepted, and we have commitments from the community to advance that agenda.
I would agree that the one measure of success would be not only the adoption, but which organizations adopt. How does this assist the different structural elements of Northeast Ohio, structural organizations, whether it's MPOs or foundations or cities or transit agencies, to do their work? How does it help them align? Do they adopt it, and does it help align their actions with the actions of others?
Right. I think a couple of things. One, just to kind of piggyback on what Grace and Hunter said, what it needs to be is sort of the basis for collective decision making. That's how you know that these folks are buying in. The other, I think that's really important, and some can argue that in some intangible ways we are already succeeding, particularly around capacity and having some sort of mutual understanding of how people are dealing with similar problems, but one section of the region is actually moving the ball more so. So those best practices, those toolkits, those are out there just waiting for us to pick up and start to duplicate. The other thing that I think is really important that will be a measure of success is really community convergence. Communities that, as a result of this process, begin to work together on different efforts and initiatives that have mutual benefit. So building that level of engagement and communication, I think, is critical as a measure of success.
Well, I'm just hoping that we can, in fact, formalize this. So, for instance, in the funds strategy, we try to build in these success metrics. And so I would like it if it would be great from our point of view if the success metrics we include for the NEOSCC are the same ones that the board of the NEOSCC has. And of course, we'd love to see if all of us who've invested in this thing could have those success metrics in our own strategy, because it's when we build it into the strategies of our own organizations that we're really committing to it.
Can you share those with us?
Well, I would like to be a receiver of, because I've surmised in the past what I thought they might be, and I've learned to my chagrin that it's different.
I know I'm not an official member of the board, but just, I think building specifically on what Grace was saying and what I'm hearing from many is a success factor for me is that this isn't about creating a plan that is then about changing the region. The creation of the plan and all of you all and your organizations and your constituent groups, the activities that you're engaged with in actually creating the plan are what creates the change. So I think building change in now. The change has already been happening. You know, I think Hunter, you mentioned it, that communities have been collaborating to create valuable tools that haven't existed. So to me, that is a success factor that we need to, and hopefully will continue to monitor and build in, is that you are the change you want to see right now.
And Brad, I think one thing, while you were talking, I think the idea of formalizing and kind of owning some of those metrics or whatever we would call them is a really good idea, because I think this work plan does a really good job of kind of finally defining what. You know, these are the products, this is the work, this is what we're working on. But I think the big unanswered question that is being worked on right now by all of us is how. And Hunter talked a little bit about this before, and that's where I think metrics play into how, kind of hold us accountable for making progress or making sure that products are reflecting what everybody would like to see. Because Hunter, one of the slides you had, I think it had what do we have was one of the questions, and in a lot of ways the existing conditions and trends started to answer this is what we have right now. Another question was what do we want, and I interpret that partially being this work plan talks from one level at least, this is what we want as a consortium, these are the products, but that goes I think finally into the unanswered question, which I know you're busy working on, and Grace has been helping to kind of flesh some of this out, is how do we manage the project and how do we manage the process, both from a project management standpoint and a planning standpoint to get the work done. And I talked to Hunter yesterday, and he mentioned briefly about in-kind, and I think part of the strategy going forward was that we could have a dialogue maybe with Sally and all of you to talk about Hunter coming to us with these are what the PMO sees as this is capacity that we need to accomplish these various work products, and then pulling board members into a dialogue where we might have resources of our own in kind. Some of it probably gets farmed out to consultants too, but where we can say, Hunter, look, we can offer you this, out of our in-kind, and then Hunter would go back and look at what we've offered and figure out how to kind of marshal all the resources. And that's something I'd anticipate would happen probably over the next 6 weeks, that we'd really start to delve into that discussion. Any other, Mike?
Well, I just wanted to, if you look at the work plan, it seems to me that the measurements of success really flow from what's in the work plan in large part. It seems to me, I think we could formalize it a little bit more, but when you look at this, I'm looking at the one chart that says products and processes. This sets out a whole range of things that we want to accomplish. So our measurement of success ought to be tied to what is in the work plan. Again, I think we could begin to set some more specific metrics based on that, and it might be wise to assign that task of formalizing those measurements to a group that considers that, rather than but I think it needs to be based in the work plan. And I think there's a lot of material that's in there already that would speak to how we measure success. So I don't think we have to go someplace else to find that. And I don't think it's a great leap. But I do agree that we may not have defined how to, on an ongoing way, measure that for purposes of evaluating our progress over the next 12 months. So rather than just leaving that to a kind of ambiguous process, I think if a few people were to focus on that and come back in the same way that we had a group work on our purchasing policy, that's what I would recommend.
So without belaboring that, because I agree that success could be fulfillment of the steps on the work plan. That's great. Now what we may though say is that, well, do the work plan deliver things in the community? So for instance, in communications and engagement, we have this excellent conditions and trends report. And we might ask ourselves, do we have expectations to the extent to which that permeates the public discourse? We have the good fortune that Mr. Litt from the Plain Dealer has picked it up and has run with it. But it really hasn't been, at least to my knowledge, picked up and permeated much of the rest of the media in the region. So we might or might not have expectations about it.
Ultimately, to me, the success of the effort is that the work of the consortium is seen as valuable and worth sustaining into the future. I mean, the judgments can be made by those who see value in these products and see that they help them facilitate their futures in a more sustainable way. So to me, the ultimate measure of success is at the end of the day, not the end of a day, the end of a day, which would be the 2014 kind of thing, all right, that what's been done, the work and the continuing work of this consortium is seen as valuable and worth sustaining. It's that point at which somebody has to make a decision, is this platform good for us going forward because of what it's done to this day, whatever that day is. The answer to that tells you whether, a lot of good things could happen along the way that people pick up and do and implement, and you've had that's interim success. But enduring success is that it's changed them to say we need this going on, and that to me is the ultimate. That investment is willing to be made by the elements of the region saying we got to keep this going because it pays off. That's my sense of what success would be.
I think one interesting little observation on my part, you're talking about a public perception and how widespread or to what extent has it been picked up from the news media standpoint or public perception. I think what Grace referred to was adoption institutionally. And I think that points up some different ways of measuring outcome or success. And I think we need to pay attention to those different categories, because this is a little bit like the elephant. You know, some of us may perceive that the most important thing is this filtering out to the public? Some may feel the most important thing is it being adopted institutionally? Someone else may say, is it useful institutionally, whether it's adopted or not? Is it substantively useful? So I think we need to be aware of these different ways of evaluating value, because if we look at just one, we may find success, and this is why we debate that we don't want just a plan that's adopted institutionally, because we don't feel that that's sufficient. But it's not sufficient, but it is still essential in some sense. But so just to point out, I think as we consider this, we need to understand these different ways of measuring.
Grace.
Just to clarify that when I'm saying that I measure success by whether or not the outputs, deliverables, the products are accepted by those outside this room, I said governmental and non-governmental. And what I mean by that is the public as well as the institutions. But furthermore, I'm not suggesting that we have a plan or a product or this deliverable that we then take out there and ask for their approval, or in some cases shove it down their throats of approval, quote unquote. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we want this to be a success, the outputs must truly be collaborative. They must come from the bottom up. And if folks have agreed on that collective vision and that collective strategy to achieve that vision, they're going to adopt it and move it forward. So it's very careful not to say we're going to do something here and then put it out there. It's getting done out there and coming up through us. But we're facilitators of that.
The question is, how do we measure success?
And it's just good discipline to know, right? Otherwise, we might as well declare success today, because we will declare success in 18 months otherwise.
And I think not to belabor things, and then Mary Beth, I'll get to you. One of the things that Mike said that really kind of opened my eyes to the necessary but not sufficient. Where adopting or approval or buy-in from the public or from institutions is critical, but then also I think back to the 6 livability principles that HUD set forth when they created this program, and just thinking as we're talking through this, it would be remiss to not remind myself even that that's what we're working toward. I mean, things like reducing vehicle miles traveled in the region, having more equitable housing, economic opportunities, all of those things, that whatever plans and whatever adoption through whatever institutions we have, the plans and the programs are only as good as their ability to make tangible progress on those livability principles. And that's not to say that I don't think NEOSCC has to carry the burden of changing all those things on its shoulder, but that we can be at least some small part of improving those things is important. Mary Beth, go ahead, sorry.
I guess to build on what both people have said is that change, and I think about the kids out there, I think that we need to think regionally and act responsibly. For example, there are things that we're doing to think regionally all the time. RTA is an extension of the Blue Line. We're beginning to say, well, what about Portage County? They serve that area. What about Akron? Those are things that I think we can do and that we need to list. And we need to be out there, us planners and us implementers have to be out there thinking, what about NEOSCC? What about the region? What about those principles? Let's make them real. And I think there are things that you can, that are small hits, like the onboard survey that RTA is doing with NOACA for the Indian region. We're doing that when we go because it's a regional
Grace.
To emphasize what Mary Beth said at the beginning of the comments, there are short-term and long-term measures of success. We need to be clear about which we want to define what. So we have a work plan here that is a short-term work plan. It goes out 17 months. That's very different than our long-term success, which we're talking about outcomes that could be measured 10 and 20 years from now. So we need to think about it both ways.
We also need to tell the story of those things that are happening. One of the things I did not mention in my remarks is that we put into your packet the HUD report that we send out. Collectively, not only as a PMO, but as this organization, we're doing a lot. And things like onboard surveys that are more than one MPO, can be blown off, or they can be understood to be extraordinarily significant data tests of collaboration in action. Part of our job is to communicate that more clearly to folks, that we are in fact doing the work of collaboration in this. And we will get, we gave you the raw report. I certainly would appreciate any feedback you have about what information you need to tell the story. When people ask you out there, well, so what's this group doing? And we need to communicate that to you more effectively.
Good discussion. I guess at this point, if there aren't any other burning questions or comments,
one other thing.
Sure.
Jeff, did you want to take a quick minute and talk about the NPO? Oh, I'm sorry. We need to approve.
Yeah, that was one of my measures of success for this item, is to see if we could get it approved.
The organization, is that covered as part of the scope of work, or is that coming up later? And specifically, well, I have two questions. One is, what, if anything, is the decision-making authority of the Technical Advisory Committee versus the Executive Committee? I would just like to hear a little bit more about that. Good, it wasn't clear. And second is the language in the scope of work wasn't clear of where the buck stops in terms of accountability. I think we need to be clear, is it the executive director or is it somewhere else in terms of delivering the project?
Hunter, do you have a staff perspective on that?
Well, the technical committee basically is the directors of the MPOs plus the COG, the 5 groups that together constitute the region's planning infrastructure at this point, and embed within them about 170 plus elected and appointed officials. The intent, from my perspective, of having that group is to be a sounding board, but also to be an early engager on the adoption, a formal adoption process through those bodies. As Grace said, you don't want to come to anybody and say, "Oh, by the way, we want you to adopt this." So, from my perspective, we need to have regular communication, and it is an advisory group. It's not a decision-making group.
Right.
But it is a group that hopefully, if we're getting off track, or if we need to talk to somebody. And the MPO directors have been very forthcoming. This, I think, just gives us a formal way of looking at it, to give some measure of assurance that when we get the product at the end, it's adoptable. The existing work plan says clearly that the plan shall be adoptable. Let's say adoptable by them. And when Shelley, the teacher, was here, she said, we really would like this to be adopted. Now, almost every other group that's doing this is an MPO. And when she says that to everybody else, it means, I want your MPO to adopt. As Grace indicated, simply having this body adopted is necessary, but we need several other layers. And one of the key layers to make sure we are engaged with elected and appointed officials who make decisions on infrastructure is that we're working closely with the directors of those 5 bodies, as we have to, but in a more defined and deliberate sense.
Brad, you had another question.
Accountability for the project, is that with the executive director? That is it's not even implicit in the document. I think we need to make it explicit.
Yeah, I think from, at least speaking for myself, the accountability, I mean, ultimately rests with the board in the sense that we took this on, we created this organization, and we hired Hunter. But then I agree that Hunter is the executive director, is responsible for carrying out the work. And if I think as a board, if we have suggestions or changes we'd like to make to the work, then it's incumbent on us to communicate those to Hunter and to make decisions and determine whether the work is being carried out. So I think it's a joint and kind of intertwined set of roles and responsibilities and accountabilities.
Well, I'd suggest we tighten up the language in the scope of work because it's subject to a lot of interpretation, and it's an easy enough to expect all of us who run organizations, something in your position description says you're responsible for all aspects of the organization's performance.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I mean, one of the next steps when I talked about how is I think we are going to continue to be working with Curary, with Sally, to do more of the organizational design as far as the how part of this. How do we manage the projects that we've identified in the work program, and how do we conduct the planning work? And I think there are ways that we can embed some of what you're suggesting, maybe to make that a little bit more explicit and clear. Any other comments? And if not, I would ask for a motion.
I have to say that before we approve this, does this work plan go with it?
We will submit, we need to submit a Gantt chart along the work plan, revised budget to Hunter.
If this is part of what we're approving, we ought to, I will move that we amend it so that the selection of a consultant pushes out 1 month, because we're already going to miss it. And I don't think it's a good practice to approve something and then miss the first deadline. This suggests that our consultant is going to start in 3 days.
And Brad, is there a specific part of this at the beginning you're talking about where it's already showing?
Analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, or is that the consultant that we selected today?
Yeah, that is the consultant you just had.
So the process consultant fits where?
Process consultant, we're putting the grant, we're putting it out today.
I misunderstood that, so I withdraw.
Okay.
We're looking to do that in October.
What is this?
We put out the RFP this beginning of September. It's the 30-day process. We're looking to bring that back to you.
Right, it is what it is. Right. This is it.
Okay. Did I see a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion?
I didn't see who did the motion.
I think Bill Davignon was the motion and Mike Challenger was the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I think we are moving into the home stretch here on the agenda. Next item is a report on the Board of Directors and Executive Committee. I don't really have anything to report on the Executive Committee beyond what we talked about with next steps on the work plan and so forth. So I'll move us on to consortium membership agreements and leverage match.
Hello everyone. We have in your packets the current consortium membership and leverage match, and we have added one more member to our consortium. Lorain County Community College Institute of Public Service has joined on, and they did join at the full prorated amount, so it does not require a motion from the board to add them on. And so we're just finalizing the paperwork with them. And that's all that I have.
Thanks, Sarah. Next item is 2012 Board and Executive Committee meeting schedule. Hunter?
I think we have that in your packet. That's really for information. September at Cuyahoga at the Ashtabula Summit and Medina, and then 13 Trumbull, Portage, Georgia, Wayne, and Lake. This is the proposed schedule. We thought of doing late in February, but we were dissuaded from that.
Mr. Chairman, is there going to be a December meeting? See, our normal date falls, I think, on Christmas.
It's close to Christmas, isn't it?
Yes.
I do believe we have a December meeting.
Do we move?
Yeah.
So there is a meeting?
Yeah, there's a meeting then, yes.
Closed record. We'll have some issues because we'll be doing budgets before Christmas, the first couple of weeks in December. So
We will, okay.
We'll work with this.
Does anybody want to trade December? See and trade you want? Okay, well, our recommendation is to approve that with the understanding that we may modify the Medina County meeting. Jeff?
I would just like to say for a second on this schedule, we did try to separate winter months from spring and fall months for driving, but we'll be contacting the folks in Cuyahoga County this week to start to put together plans for September. And as Hunter said, we can move other months around. I think Ashtabula, I think Peggy was fine with October. We'll double check and set that final
Chair? Sure, go ahead. I have a question, and it's relative to 12 counties, 12 months, and we just passed a policy that anticipates moving board meetings to every other month. And how's that fit? Do we have to visit that now, or somebody has to think that out? Or do we just make it 12 counties in 18 months and say, what do we do here?
You haven't made a decision on quarterly meetings, so.
Well, that's going to be coming, though. I see it happen.
Jeff, go ahead.
There was some conversation that we would still get together in each county without a governance meeting that day, but I think we can work through that.
Okay.
I think that's a good suggestion too.
We'll take this to the executive.
We could do 12 counties in 12 months without doing 12 board meetings in 12 months.
Okay, that's just a point of inquiry. Don't want to get this complicated.
Well, the next meeting will be, the executive committee will be in Akron on September 11th. We're also preparing the board member survey. Jeff, you want to talk about that? I believe we're working on that.
We will be releasing a board member survey at the end of this week. We've been working on it with Sally's team, Jason and Hunter and I. We'll be receiving it via SurveyMonkey. If you have a problem opening SurveyMonkey, some browsers do it off of that. We can send you a written copy of it. So it will be distributed hopefully on Friday this week.
Thanks. Right, takes us to item 5, which is the Program Management Office report, and I'll turn it back over to the staff again.
As I indicated before, the HUD monthly report is included in your document, and that's the raw report. We talk about everything. So one of the things we are asking is if you look at that and say, here's some things we'd really like to see and focus in on so that it's useful to you. It's just, and if it's useful in the current form, that's just as easy to do it that way. The 12 county zoning map, Anthony.
Quickly, I know last month we debuted the maps. This month, the thing that was different, and again, this is all real-time information. Last month, the maps were complete. This month, the data files with all the local zoning, land use codes next to the NEOSCC land use and zoning codes are all packaged together. Thanks to the GIS point person, Bob Now, staff member Sean Phillips was in the audience. Give him props there. Just all of the data, everyone did a lot of good work but he was the one who dealt with the 12 counties of data. And we severely slowed his equipment and maybe even crashed it a couple times, even though they have good equipment there. Just an incredible amount of information that he had to deal with and put together. So I appreciate all the team members that worked on this project. Going forward will be analysis of the land use and the zoning and how it plays into the future of NEOSCC and how we use land and the scenario planning, all of those components. But we just at least wanted to tell you that it's now available and accessible to be used by the public, and it might, some of the, obviously the data files aren't going to be useful necessarily for the general public or even anyone here unless you have that GIS ability, but get it to your mapping people and they'll be able to manipulate it and pull stuff out. And we'll also send you a link that shows you where it is exactly, but it's on our website right now for NEOSCC. It will be in the next newsletter link. So if no other questions, I just wanted to give you that latest information. Thank you.
Finally, the condition and trends platform, engagement toolkit, and the MPO workshop, Jeff.
Is it 3 o'clock? Is that possible still? Is it close? Is it close? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go back a little bit to Hunter's presentation when he touched on the MPO workshops and planning workshops coming up this fall. These are workshops that were part of the original work plan to really engage the members of the MPOs and the COGs in the conversation about our work. So we'll be calling together kind of this technical committee group to go over the agenda for those and then sending invitations out on behalf of the MPOs over the next couple of weeks. And what we see them as is a couple-hour workshops focused, number 1, on information about what it is we're doing, number 2, about the conditions and trends, and then number 3, about where we're going. Simultaneously to that, we're going to use the networks of the MPOs as well as the networks of many of you as board members to have public meetings and organizational meetings throughout the 12 counties over the next 3 months related to the conditions and trends platform. I could be very honest, I think that we haven't driven as much traffic to that site as I was possibly intending back in June, but we have worked pretty intently with our strategy, and I think we have a couple of great strategies going forward to drive more attention and more focus on the site, as well as we're working on some engagement opportunities with Patty as well. And lastly, I wanted to announce that we did create, at the suggestion of the Communications and Engagement Workstream, a Conditions and Trends Toolkit for all of you. And what it is, it's a digital toolkit that has downloadable newsletter articles of varying lengths. It has logos that you could put on your website that will go to different portions or different parts of the platform, as well as other tools that you could use in order for us to get the word out about the platform. In your packets today, you have the printed executive summary. We do have some standard letter content that we've developed to send out to your board members if you're interested in doing that. And I will be working with Kelly Harris to reach out to all of you in the next couple of weeks to help with that process. And then lastly, and I think this speaks to something Brad brought up, I mean, we have been very fortunate in the coverage that Steve Litt has given the platform and other parts of our initiative. But we are going to be making some tours to the different editorial boards over the next month. This is something that we kind of put off a little bit as we were finishing up this work plan and kind of getting our arms around what scenario planning would be. But this will be something that we will call on people regionally to help us out with as we go to the different papers. We have drafted a standard a letter to the editor that is still being reviewed by Jason and Hunter. So we will get that out to all of you for your information as well. But it is something that I kind of feel like we took a little bit of time off from really pushing on the platform, and the month of September and October we're really going to get out there. And again, I urge you all to join the platform as members so you can comment and participate in the dialogue online. So,
Director, will there be an attendance engagement list at the next meeting of those who haven't signed up?
We could do that. We could do that. Lastly, I did want to say that related to the toolkit, there's going to be many facets to it in terms of social media and different things
that your staffs might want to get involved in helping us promote. And so every week, starting next week, we're going to have a webinar or a go-to meeting about that. And it'll vary in length from a half an hour to an hour, walking through the different tools, how you can use them. We'll probably stagger the dates and times so that it's not every Friday for the next couple weeks. But we really want people to get accustomed to using these tools, because I think the platform is a good place to launch, and we need to start talking about it. All right. Mr. Segedy.
Jeff, you talked about a little bit about engaging the MPO board members, and probably as part of that process you'll be reaching out to MPO directors, but I was going to suggest also maybe taking, I don't want to put, say, Steve or Connie, you on the spot today, but if you guys are willing, I mean, as board members of an MPO, it might be nice, Jeff, if you reach out to them a little bit to get their perspective as members, what types of engagement or what types of sessions or...
No, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, just to make the best use of people's time, but also to allow them to provide input that I think an MPO director really can't when you're trying to engage the board members themselves.
No, absolutely. Any other questions? Lastly, thank you, Stark County.
Right. Any other business before the consortium today? Joe.
I just wonder if Hunter, if you could take a minute to just give those of the board and others that were not at the Keisha meeting what the essence of what she had to say, or any comments you might want to make.
Well, yes, I think Shelley Patisha is welcome other people to chime in as well. Shelley Patisha is the head of the Office of Housing and Sustainable Communities, basically our boss. We met, she came to work with Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur in the morning, and we had a meeting of members of the executive committee who could make it on a pretty tight timeline. Shelley reviewed the work we've done, and I think has been continues to be very supportive of that work. My takeaway from that is a couple of things. First of all, she said that this is a high-profile project. It's one of the largest grants we've seen in a high-profile area. She recognizes the complexity, the challenge that we took on to create an organization to do this. Because every other grant, with the exception, I think, of Fresno State, in the initial pool, and I think probably the second pool, is an established metropolitan planning organization. So I think she acknowledges that this is a big challenge that this region has taken on to do this. She also was very clear that she has limited any authority to extend the grant. So he basically said, it's what you got is what you got, get it done. She was very clear about the de minimis, the minimal requirement that they're expecting at the end of the day. And I will say that my observation is, as the year and a half, or 2 years has gone on since the discussion around the original grant proposal, HUD has become far clearer about what they expect in grants of this nature. We're in the first tier, and so they were not as clear to themselves and to us about all that they expected. But she's very clear at this point that what we're expected is, as a, let's say, term a Category 1 grant recipient, to do a regional framework plan, some form of a map that is adopted. Say by whom? Again, most of the organizations are MPOs. In most cases, it's a map and a policy plan, like we saw those of us with the scenario planning work that other communities have done. That's the minimum that is required of them, of the grant recipients in this category. We expressed our desire to go beyond that, part to build the constituency going forward with the tools. And I think from their perspective, and I think I'm being accurate, that's fine, but you got to do your homework first. You've got to get the plan. That's what's driving, and it's a driver for the scenario planning consultancy that we're sending out, and the regional planning consultancy we're sending out to the market this week to get that done. She also mentioned that there are a set of metrics, performance measures, components, potentially of our own dashboard that HUD has required of the most current round of grant recipients, and is suggesting that the first round of recipients also use. It's the core potentially of a dashboard. These are national metrics that other regions are being asked to look at, about vehicle miles traveled, about distance from parks. There's a whole set of metrics that they're trying to get a handle on looking at across regions, across the nation, and across departments. She did talk about the way in which the federal consortium is growing, and I think from our perspective, Connie, you were there, I thought you and Mark Barbash were pretty excited by the idea that EDA could be part of this and might actually save some money and effort on the EDA fund, as we're potentially saving effort on the assessment of impediments to fair housing. We talked a little bit about that, how, again, the feds are looking at this as an efficiency move on their part. If they can look regionally at things like fair housing conditions, if they can look regionally at things like broad economic development strategy, rather than requiring individual smaller jurisdictions to do that, they save time, localities save money. So I think there was a discussion around those. I think it was a clear message, it was a firm message that we need to get out of business that put their funding in. We continue to have, I think, one of the best, if not the best, support team from HUD, both locally and nationally, and we keep them informed of the challenges. They sending it all the way up, but that's kind of the bottom line. Is the regional vision plan is what they see a minimum condition. In addition, we need to meet all the other federal guidelines and compliance requirements. And those of us who do this for a living know what that means. So,
that was a little interesting is that they're having their own growing working interagency.
Yes.
Talking about how difficult it was to bring DOT along, who has been mired in much of the same kind of bureaucracy for years and years and years. So they have their own challenges. Made me feel a little better that working through our challenges, they haven't figured out exactly.
Several others are at the meeting. Are there other that if I've missed something, is there some points that you want to make?
Any other items for the good of the order?
Just a little point of order. Rob Hankins, who is the director of the Arts and Starts, going into a fairly pretty half-hour walking tour of the arts and political posts. Anybody interested in the book, we can organize mine. You will be here shortly. Then they're interested. I'm out here around the facility. Thank everybody for coming.
Thanks. Thanks for both for having me. Anything further before we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, Kelly just asked me to remind everybody board meetings are on YouTube if you want to go back and rehash our past glories. So you are adjourned. Thank you.